This is LBC. Nick Ferrari at Breakfast with Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
10 to 8 is the time. After the news at 8 o'clock, I want to come on to the figures that were produced yesterday about the cost of climate change, which is the kind of exactly the kind of area that my next guest is going to want to look at. Kwasi Kwarteng is the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Conservative MP for Spelthorne. Thank you for being on the line for us, Mr. Kwarteng. Just before we come on to climate change, the costs of it, I want to talk a little bit about these isolation changes. Why August the 16th?
So what we've done is we've got these two dates. So July the 19th, as everybody knows, was a delay from June the 21st. And August the 16th gives a little bit more protection in terms of dealing with coronavirus. We've always said that the 19th of July is not the end. It's the end of the roadmap, but it's not the end of dealing with coronavirus. And looking at the numbers, we felt that having an extended period till August the 16th for self-isolation, and we'll lift the self-isolation rules on August 16th, gives an extra measure of protection.
But millions of people, those being asked to self-isolate now, are fit and well and healthy. We've got the tests in place that can see whether they've got coronavirus or not. That already exists. Why are we waiting?
I think that there's obviously a balance to be struck, because some people are saying that we're lifting restrictions too quickly. Other people are saying that we've had them for too long. And of course, the government has to strike a balance. And I think that the balance that we've struck in terms of August the 16th for self-isolation rules makes sense.
And so the gap in that gap between the 19th and the 16th, what is going to happen to mean that by the 16th, people who are double jabbed can come out of that quarantine once they've had a test?
So one of the things that will happen, I mean, obviously it's 4 weeks, is that there'll be far more people who've been double jabbed. And the people who will be double jabbed in that period are younger people, people who are professionals in their working life, and I think it gives a lot more security. That's the idea.
But in the meantime, you will know, and I'm sure as a business minister, you will be hearing from people making representations to you about this. These businesses, some places are having to shut down. There are bars, there are restaurants having to close. They don't have the staff. There are hospitals that are running out of people to be able to come and man it at such a critical time. This is costing the economy now.
So what really cost the economy a great deal was actually having the lockdown in the first place. And all the people that I've spoken to from the hospitality sector, the retail sector, were very disappointed, rightly, that we couldn't open up on the 21st of June. And once we missed that date, I think there was a real pressure, rightly, to try and see what we could do to reopen the economy. We looked at the numbers, we looked at the science, and we felt that the 19th of July is a plausible date. We haven't actually made the decision about the 19th of July, I hasten to add. We're going to do that on Monday, this coming Monday. But the hospitality sector is very, very enthused by the fact that we're actually going to reopen on the 19th of July. They're enthused by that prospect.
Do you think it's fair to say to those people who haven't been jabbed that they will have to face restrictions that those who have been double jabbed won't?
I think it's not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of trying to keep people safe. And clearly, if you've been double jabbed, you represent less of a risk in terms of transmitting the illness, the virus, than someone who hasn't had any jabs.
And so the people who haven't had any jabs will now forever or for the foreseeable, for how long will they have to quarantine if they come into contact with someone who has tested positive?
Well, what I would suggest to people who haven't had jabs is to get a jab. Millions of fellow countrymen and women have done that. I think it's given. But
if they don't, they
face
a tougher. They face a life of greater restriction, don't they?
Well, if they don't, in the short term, I can't predict, forever and ever and ever. But in the short term, obviously, we're facing a global pandemic. Hundreds of thousands have died, millions have died across the world, and we have to bring in measures. And clearly, if you you've got a double jab, if you've been vaccinated twice, you represent less of a risk than someone who hasn't had a jab.
Let me ask you about the cost of climate change. Obviously, the news about the Vauxhall plant and Nissan earlier on in the week, there's a lot of money being spent on this, rightly, understandably. Are people going to see their gas bills? Are people going to see their petrol prices and their costs to run a car increase in order to meet that target of net zero by 2050?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. If you look at something like offshore wind, and you'll remember, even as late as 2012, 40% of our electricity came from essentially burning coal. Now, today, that figure is less than 2%. So we've had a massive transition in terms of how our electricity is generated. But if you look at the actual cost, it's pretty much the same. So because the wholesale cost has actually gone down. So we can't predict what.
So people aren't going to see, as was reported in the papers the other week, a rise of, say, a third in their gas bills. That's not going to happen.
I don't think necessarily that's going to happen.
What about gas boilers? That's one area where a lot of emissions come from. Is there a pledge still to ban gas boilers from new homes by 2023?
I think there is a pledge to move away from gas boilers, but there's no sense that we're gonna force people to rip out gas boilers and replace them imminently. It'll be a phase out, much like the ICE in terms of the cars. I imagine
that's got a date
the sort
to
of thing.
it. Do we have a date to the boilers?
No, we haven't got a date because we're consulting about it and we're formulating policy. But I think that there may well be a move away from gas boilers, but that's not something that's going to happen next week.
No, and will the retrofitting that will need to take place, whether it's heat pumps or whatever, will that have to come out of households' expense, or will the government be able to subsidise that? Because that could cost people tens of thousands of pounds.
You're right, Tom. It is costly, but the government has always protected vulnerable people, has always provided support. Already today, we provide things like the warm home discount. We had the Green Homes grant, which was up to £10,000 free for vulnerable families. There's always going to be a measure of support. This isn't going to be something which will cost people, vulnerable people,
but I see
anything.
So it won't cost them anything.
It won't cost them much. The poorest in society will always be protected and helped to make this transition.
I see in your 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution
Yes.
You say that you want to see a gradual move away from fossil fuel boilers over the next 15 years. So is that the kind of timescale people will be working towards?
Yeah, I think that's so yes, I think you're right. So 15 years. So it's 2021 now, and 15 years time is 2036. So we're talking about a date in the 2030s as opposed to anything next week or in a year's time.
But people should be prepared for that change to happen over the course of the next 15 years, and the poorest will receive a grant to be able to do that?
I'm sure that this is where we're going. This is where we've said, as you say, in the 10-point plan. And as we've always done, we've always committed support to people to help that transition. That's very clear.
I don't know whether you've seen, I'm sure you have seen the fact that petrol prices are rising. They continue to keep going up. A lot of people will feel, because they can't afford an electric vehicle right now, that they are being almost priced off the road here. And we all want to be as green as we possibly can. But do you feel that there is how much is there the right balance being struck between helping people to go green and forcing them to?
It's always a difficult trade-off, Tom, because we want to encourage certain types of behaviour, but at the same time, we realise that there can be a cost involved, and where there are costs, we've tried as a government to soften that impact. If you look at the fuel duty, we've suspended the escalator on fuel duty for the last 10 years. We've protected consumers in that way, and as we do the transition to a greener economy, I think the government will intervene and help our country make that transition.
I see. I don't know whether you're a football fan, Mr. Kwarteng. You're obviously
I'm a huge football fan.
You're good. You'll obviously be aware of what's coming tonight. I see that there's a report that some of your colleagues in the cabinet are worried about Wembley and the fans being acting as a sort of super spreader event. Are you worried by that?
Yeah, there's always concern. Clearly, as I always say, the word I always use is balance. There are always going to be risks. So if you're in government, you have to balance and you have to weigh using your judgment. I think the competition has gone really well, not just for England. I think it's been well run. People have enjoyed the football. And I think we can manage this risk. But to say that there is no risk if you have thousands of people in one place,
so it could be despite the testing, I think there's risk. And everything else. There's
always risk in life. There's always risk in life. I think we're managing the risk. I'm confident that there won't be a big outbreak, but I can't guarantee that now. And we've got to just see what happens. I think it'll be well managed, as it has been in the last few weeks. I think it's a great competition. I think England have got a really good chance of winning. But we've got to manage that process, and we've got to recognise that where there are lots of people, we've got to be more careful.
And I don't suppose I'm sure you've seen the news about the lorry drivers, lack of lorry drivers, and the difficulty getting beer onto the shelves ahead of the game. We've not got anything like the army on standby to drive the HGVs if the beer needs to get to the shelves quickly for tonight, Minister?
I don't know.
No, you don't think that they could be brought in at a moment's notice? No.
This is not a critical national emergency.
I'll tell that to the people who are trying to get beer. Listen, great to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Kwasi Kwarteng, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Climate Change, speaking on LBC. After the news at 8 o'clock...
He chooses Grealish instead. It's Grealish, it's Kane! England have a 2-goal lead! Harry Kane has faced so many questions, but there's no better answer than that!
England on the cusp of Euros glory. 60,000 will be in Wembley tonight to watch them play Denmark. Elsewhere, Heathrow is to trial fast-tracking vaccinated arrivals to get the sector moving again. But first...
As a young person, I'm 25 years old. I'm genuinely really scared and frightened of what's to come in the future.
We are used to warnings of the